Well, good evening and welcome back to the Seasiders Podcast Friday night preview show. We are live on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter/Periscope. So hopefully many of you can join us tonight. We've got a fun packed show talking all about Blackpool versus Sunderland, Mickey Walsh goal and the Sunderland documentary, which went out in 2018 and finished in 2020. Lots to talk about ahead of tomorrow's game, which will kick off at 12:30 p.m. British time. So anyone who's might miss it, there's a little reminder. But we'll crack on with the show. We'll bring in our guests one by one. And first of all, we have Sean. Welcome to the Seasiders Podcast, Sean.
Cheers. You caught me unawares there. I was expecting Tom on the screen.
Yeah, just I think Tom's was on a long work shift tonight, so he can't make it. But we've got Sean. It threw me a little bit, to be fair, not saying his name first. And we're also joined by Graham Falk, who is on the What the Falk podcast. I actually was struggling to say that pre-show, but Graham, it's great to have you on the podcast here.
Yeah, great to be here, mate. Thanks for having me. No problem at all. I like to come on and confuse people with my name and the pronunciation, so we started well.
Good. Let's keep it going for that. Just before Graham, what we do with our guests who have not been on the show before, just tell us a little bit about how you got into starting your podcast and kind of how you got supporting Sunderland.
I'll go with the supporting Sunderland first and foremost. I live in Glasgow just now, and I think some people specifically in England can sometimes pick up a little bit of a Scottish twang. People in Glasgow definitely say I don't. But I moved to Glasgow about 10 years ago, but I was born in Southwick in Sunderland, so like kicking the arse away from Roker Park. I'm 35 this year, so I do remember Roker Park. I was took to the Fulwell end in 1993. We played Wolves at home. First goal was a defensive mistake, and the second goal was Jeff Thomas basically running 70 yards to the centre of our midfield to score. So I was kind of set up for life for that kind of game. But much like most people, my dad, my family are all Sunderland. There's no one that's deflected, and if they did, there wouldn't be a member of the family. So Sunderland is kind of how it started and how it ended. And in terms of the podcast question, well, I'd been with a few different podcasts previously. Enjoyed it. It's good fun. I really enjoy doing it, speaking to former players, previewing games, much like I suppose you guys do as well. It's just good fun, and it's been an absolute godsend throughout lockdown because it's kept my interest in it 100% up. It's made sure I've been sharp and I'm watching games and things like that. And thankfully, the podcasting world, the way that it goes, I ended up going to university in my 30s a couple of years ago and qualified fully as a journalist, and now work for the Scotsman up in Scotland, hence why I'm up in Glasgow currently. So just like that, really, I suppose it all started with a love of football, and unfortunately it started with Sunderland as well, but wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, being a Sunderland fan in the last few years probably hasn't been easy for you, but how have you found watching football this season? Obviously, it's a shame. Obviously, the pandemic started, mad to say, 12 months ago, over 12 months ago now. But how have you adjusted to life watching Sunderland on the old iFollow? I've
really missed it, to be honest. I think the last game that I was at was actually Rangers in a European competition, so like a big 55,000 seater stadium, and before that it was Sunderland versus Gillingham, slightly different. But I've just kind of missed being around people. I've been really lucky that I've managed to get to some games to report on them, but it's really not the same. If there's anyone that's done it, I'd reiterate, I've been at maybe 21-ish games this year to report on, and really, really, really is not the same. There's no atmosphere. It's like watching an exhibition. I prefer crowd noise, I've realised over time. And I've definitely preferred having more than one camera angle, which Sunderland have put in since about February time when Kira Lewis-Dreyfus came in. But I'm absolutely gagging to get back to the stadium. Renewed my season ticket yesterday, and just I cannot wait just to get inside the stadium and see it full. I got in once in September time because the team that I work for on the weekend, a women's team, they played Sunderland ladies, and the game had to be played at the Stadium of Light, and I got in there and I had a lot of friends that were jealous, and I just had to say to them, look, it's just not the same. It's basically just like a building. So yeah, get me back in, get the match day routine back, a couple of pints in the spoons beforehand, and commiseration drinks afterwards. I think that'll suit me down to the ground. Thank you very much.
If there was one thing, Graham, that you miss from a match day experience, what would it be for you?
The community element of it. I think it's probably an obvious answer, but that's probably what got me hooked into football. Is I like being around people. There's something quite romantic about hugging a stranger or arguing with a stranger or just basically building personalities with people and kind of doing what we're doing just now, having a chat with, two people I've never met in my life about something that we're obviously very passionate about. I miss that element of it. At the moment, we can't even hug our loved ones at some point. Mm-hmm. So to go from hugging strangers every weekend to not being able to hug your loved ones, I'm kind of missing that element of it. So definitely community. I just want to see people again. That would be really cool.
Sean, and you're someone like myself who's very fortunate to be at games and in stadiums. And what would be the one thing that you've missed this season from going to games?
I think, again, similarly, I think when you've been through the mire as a football club, that almost grows that bond stronger with the outside of the game, and the whole day around it makes it more special. You think of going to the pub at midday, meeting your mates, and then going to the game. And almost for a few years, that was the part you were looking forward to. And the game was just sort of happening in the background as we were losing again under Jose Riga or losing again under Lee Clark or what have you. It's like that makes the whole process so much more special. And obviously, we've been really fortunate to be able to go to games. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I've been going since New Year. But again, as Graham says, it's kind of like a shell of the place. You get excited when you first attend, but when the kickoff comes and there's no roar from the fans and you don't hear that bellow from the north stand, it's like something's sort of been ripped out of the whole experience. So yeah, that's similar to Graham really for me.
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree with what both of you have said. But a quick question here from Gareth. Gareth, thanks for getting your comment in. I'll put it on the screen so everyone can see. But just a quick question for you, Graham, really. Why are Sunderland called the Mackems out of interest?
Obviously before my time, ever so slightly when I think it first got coined. There's a few people that think it is an insult. I've never seen it as that. And if it is, I'll take it on board. That's fine. I believe from my granddad telling me it had something to do with our accent. We're obviously a shipbuilding city. And we used to make them, mack them and tack them. So it was like macking the ships and tacking the ships to where they need to go. So it became like Mackems. But there's also a myth that I think it's a myth, that Newcastle fans used it to take the mick out of our accent, which is, well, it's ironic, isn't it? For them to be taking the mick out of any accent. But I think that's what it is. I think we used to mack them and tack them, and it's very much a Sunderland dialect, mack and tack. So I think it came from that.
No, definitely. We'll cheers, Gareth, for the comments, and Ray Gregson regarding our comments earlier about what we're missing about going to match days. It's football without fans is nothing. I completely agree with that. But we'll move on to a next topic for us. It's last games for both teams. Sean, I'll come to you first. Blackpool 0, Accrington 0. Could have been a lot worse for Blackpool with the last-minute penalty, which was saved by Chris Maxwell. But your initial thoughts on Blackpool's performance and the result on Tuesday?
I think it stemmed from the sort of lack of creative options that we have at the moment. Obviously, with the amount of injuries that we've got and playing 4-4-2, you're sort of struggling to pick off the bench someone that can come in on the hour mark and make that edge of the difference when the game's so even. Obviously, Accrington made basically no effort to play on the front foot. They were very penned in for most of the game. And it's about being able to break them down. And you think of players like CJ Hamilton, Gary Medine that are missing at the moment. And those are the sort of players that you rely on to do that sort of thing in a match. And we don't have that at the moment. So all in all, at the end of the day, it was just one of those games that sort of cycles by and you just know it's not going to be your day. It was kind of a non-event really by the end of the game. But what really matters for Blackpool these days is that if they're not on the game, it's that they don't lose the game. And that's been something that's become more and more clear throughout the season, is that they don't lose games that they play poorly in. And ultimately, if you keep doing that, but then keep picking up the 3 points when it matters against the bigger sides in these big games like we've got tomorrow, then ultimately that's what's going to take you up into the next division.
Yeah, definitely. I think I said to you pre-game as well as David said in here that Kai 2 great chances, and if Blackpool do get that early goal, we can see it being a 2 or 3-0 game in this one. But Blackpool never got that goal. And Gareth also said, we look tired. It's been a long old season with matches coming thick and fast. Injuries may be catching up with us. And come to you, Graham. You can understand why teams are tiring, aren't they? Because they're not used to playing every Saturday and Tuesday. But it's just one season. I think every club and every player just has to get through, don't they?
It's been a bizarre season. We've talked about the lack of fans and stuff there. I think they're playing more often than they are anyway. And I know there's the argument they're professional footballers and yada, yada. I don't necessarily buy into that. They are humans as well. Naturally, you get mentally tired and physically tired. And especially when it comes down to a promotion race or a relegation battle, there's a big mental element to that as well. And you can definitely get mental tiredness. And it's not helped if your body's physically knackered as well. But even in the past, maybe where you've got 5 games to go and you want the fans to roar you on, say for example, Blackpool game, you've got all your fans back now, your ownership's been sorted. You're playing Accrington at home, you get a load of fans roaring you onto that. You might get that last minute window because it's going to give them that boost that they maybe physically don't have. Sunderland certainly could do with it. Really, really could have done with it against Charlton, for example. I think it's happened to everyone, and it's, there's certain teams that have had 3-week breaks. I think most teams have at this division because there was a point when everyone was just getting COVID. But I don't think that'll have helped really. I think if anything, you've got another 3 weeks where you're having to catch up, and it's just been a really, really bizarre season that I'll be honest, I would not want to live through again as a fan, and I'm sure the players won't want to live through again either. And I think it's hard when you get to this part of the season and you've been in the form that Blackpool have been in, Sunderland have been in, and you come up against a Wigan or an Accrington and you don't pull off the result that you want to pull off. It becomes so important, and all that effort you've put in and all those that run that you've had can sometimes hinder you, especially in Sunderland's case. That'll mentally drain you even more because you're the only ones feeling that pressure really when you're on the pitch. But I think we've just got to get on with it as fans, and the players just have to get on with it. And hopefully, come this time next season, things will be back to normal. We'll be playing Saturday and occasional Tuesdays, because I think it's been difficult as a podcaster to do Tuesday, Saturday, let alone as a player. So yeah, I think it's definitely a feasible argument that the players might just be running out of steam, especially if they put in the effort that Blackpool and Sunderland have over the past few months.
Yeah, Sean, coming here, you might have seen the comment. Alan said, tied, so why no subs? I'm assuming he means Blackpool in terms of Tuesday or maybe Sunderland. But again, you can understand why, if you've got this big squad and you can name, 5, 7 on the bench, that why managers don't use it more often. But I guess when you're at this stage of the season, whether you're Blackpool or Sunderland, in our case, is that you want your best team out there and you want the players to make an impact. But I can understand where he's coming from with that.
Yeah, I mean, we made... Oh, sorry, I just jumped in.
Go on, Sean, you go first.
Just going to say, with the subs obviously, especially in the Accrington game, it was the case of the subs that were on the bench. You've got a full back 4 on the bench, but ultimately the game's 0-0, and you're not going to be looking to bring in defensive reinforcements. The subs that were there, I would have brought on Brad Holmes. I would have given him a chance in the side to prove himself, because ultimately what was the worst that was going to happen out of that? You would have just drawn the game 0-0 as we did anyway. There was no real, apart from obviously they got that penalty in the end and Chris Maxwell pulled out that big moment. It was never a case that we were going to be sort of bombarded in the attacking sense and be on the back foot generally in the game. But I'm not sure. I was trying to figure out during the game if it was fatigue or if it was simply just an inability to break Accrington's defensive line down. And it was sort of a hard balance to look at, because we had the creative options there that were able to do it, but it's whether we were just missing that spark. I think potentially if we'd have been playing 4-2-3-1 and had the common options that we tend to have in that position, then maybe we would have been able to break them down. Obviously, I think Sims looked isolated again. We were playing him more as a target man again, which we've done a few times this season. It's just not worked, and we kind of hung him out to dry a bit against Accrington. But ultimately, it seems to be that Blackpool struggle more against the teams who are on a bad spell of form or lower down the league, because they make no effort to come out against Blackpool, and Blackpool play well on the counter-attack. So against Sunderland, that's where you're hoping that there'll be more options to be able to do that, and that's where the difference will be.
Perfect. Yeah, quite a few comments saying about Brad Holmes there. You brought him up. We'll see if he's in your Blackpool starting 11 for tomorrow. You're predicted. We'll wait and see. So if you're going to get those in, just hold off for the time being. We'll get them later on because comments do get deleted the early in the show they come in. So we'll ask for your team selections later on. But Graham, should we mention Tuesday night or should we skip Tuesday night for you?
What happened on Tuesday? I've completely forgot about it.
2-1.
I think we have to. Yeah.
What went wrong for you? What went wrong for you? Obviously, a team that, in some respects, are at the bottom and fighting relegation, so they've got something to play for, like Sunderland. But was it just a mentality? Wigan just wanted it more than Sunderland? What are your thoughts on the game?
I'd agree with you on that. I think Wigan just wanted it more, and that's probably the most painful thing to say. And I tried my very best after the Charlton game because I'd said for weeks. I do a stream with the Sunderland Echo, and obviously have to mind my P's and my Q's and try my best to, really say what I think and stay as balanced as I could. But I genuinely felt that at some point we were going to lose. You're not going to go at the end of the season not getting beat. And if we did, fair play, would go up. But I said there's going to be a point where we have a disappointing result, and it's how we react to it. So when we got beat off Charlton, I wouldn't say I was like distraught. I was a bit like, that wasn't great. But Charlton are a decent side. Charlton always get one on over us. It's just the way that it is. That's what Charlton do. And I kind of went, the biggest game in our season now is how we react on Tuesday. You see a lot of the times teams that go up or teams that win the league will have a setback. And the way they react to the next game is 100% what defines their season. So I kind of put a lot on that game against Wigan because it was our game in hand. And we took the lead probably undeservedly. It was nice to see Charlie White score again because I think he went like 4 or 5 games without a goal. And then you thought, well, we've scored, fair enough, kick on. I want to be a bit fairer, but it's difficult. We were just poor, really poor. And it was sort of harking back to those sort of Parkinson days when you just seen what was coming and 1-1 at half time, you just went, well, I see what's coming here. They're going to score early second half. We're gonna absolutely bottle it. And we've come out of that game having our best defender injured. We've already got Tom Flanagan injured. We've already had Bailey Wright injured for a long time. He was forced back in on Tuesday due to McLaughlin being injured. With Jordan Willis has been out for the season and struggled at the start of the season, so we've never really had him fit. And Dion Sanderson's been one of the stars of the season, and now he's, I don't think he's fractured his back. I think there was a worry that he had a fracture in his back, but it's not. But they've got to be careful with him, so he's going to be out. Some people say the season. Lee Johnson said today probably not, but I mean, even during that run, we had Luke O'Nien playing at centre half. We're really at bare bones. So we've come out of that game with further problems. And it was massive. Like a couple of years ago, when Jack Ross was here, we went third with 2 games in hand on Barnsley, and we were level on points. Beat Rochdale in the last minute, and it just felt like, yep, that's it. And then we got beat 5-4 off Coventry, which is just the most Sunderland thing to happen, losing 5-4. And drew it home to Burton, and it very much felt like that. People have said it in the Sunderland fan base. Yeah, no, we've got games in hand, and it's in our hands, but they're games in hand. You've still got to win those games. And lo and behold, we didn't. And I think it's probably scunnered us. To answer Gareth's question, absolutely 100% correct. When you say a few, you mean lots. I think we have 1 fit centre half, but it's been like that for a while, to be honest. And it's not feeling positive at Sunderland, but Sunderland can be. Sunderland as a fan base, if we win tomorrow, we're going to win the league. It can sometimes be like that. I don't think we're any different than any of the fan bases, but Tuesday was just a real kick in the teeth because it was the one game we really needed to get a win from. I think a draw would have been a bad result, so to lose it was just, but fully deserved to Wigan. They just wanted it more than us, to be honest.
Do you think that's kind of the top 2 gone for you, or do you still think there's a lot to play for both teams up there? Oh, sorry, all 3 teams up there.
No, I think that's it done. I think it's playoffs. We've got Blackpool home and away.
Yeah.
I don't know whether we'll get 6 points out of that, and we got Hull away. I don't know whether we'll get 6 points out, 3 points out of that. and we need to get 3 points out of every one of them, and Hull and Peterborough to drop points. I mean, if Northampton do us a favour tonight against Peterborough, maybe I'll change my opinion, but I don't I don't hugely rate Hull as a team, to be honest. I do quite rate Peterborough, but I find both of them are just very consistent, whereas Sunderland haven't been this season. We've been severely hindered by sacking Phil Parkinson way too late, because 2 wins, 2 games earlier might have equaled another 2 wins and we could be clear at the top by now. But if spots, maybes, I think it's gone.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a tight race. Definitely who gets the top, and those teams who fight it out for the playoff places. But we'll move on to talk kind of all things Sunderland. 40 games, 19 wins, 14 draws, 7 defeats, 71 points on average, 1.77 per game. If you look at the 40, third in League One. I guess you use the word there. Probably it's going to sum up and answer this question. But is it just consistency that's kind of knocked your season from not going up automatically? And also, secondly, how do you assess that the season so far?
I mean, it started steady, but I mean that in the probably not the best of ways, because we were like winning games, but not well. I think there was a game against Ipswich we won 2-1, and Ipswich have not been good this season, but I think Ipswich probably deserved something out of it. We got a late penalty. They got a player sent off, correctly so, but we'd won a few games where it was like the other team was down 10 men, or it was a penalty, and it wasn't the most impressive of performances. And people kind of said, well, you know, a win's a win's a win. If we get out of this league winning 1-0 to the rest of the season, I don't care. And I sort of agreed with that. But then the cracks start appearing, and you get draws at Fleetwood and stuff like that. And then I think where it really culminated is Phil Parkinson for me. Well, probably before he came, to be honest, because I don't think he was the right choice. I don't think he's a bad person from it, but I don't think he was the right choice for Sunderland. I just don't think that fitted. But we lost at home to Portsmouth, I think, was our first defeat. You can sort of take that on the chin. Portsmouth, they were a good side and were playing well at the time. Then we got beat off like MK Dons. We got beat home off Wigan, which was actually Lee Johnson's first game, but he came in hours beforehand. But we've lost games like that. Our home form has notoriously been really, really strong. And it's kind of drawn stupid away games where the problem has been in previous years. This season, it's been probably drawn stupid games again, which is very much a Sunderland thing to draw 1-1 since we came into this division. But also, we've lost at home to MK Dons, Portsmouth. We've lost at home to Wigan. It's just teams that probably shouldn't be getting beat off, with all due respect, if you want to get promoted. And I think we've lost 5 or 6 games at home this season, whereas in the previous 2 seasons with fans in, we'd only lost 2 in total, one of them being Coventry, one of them being Burton. So I suppose it at least dispels the myth that Sunderland fans are a distraction and cause problems when they're in there. But I think that's kind of what it's been. But if you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have said, you know what, we'll change the manager. It's been great since then. Things have started working out. But it's just felt very Sunderland this week. So it's difficult to be anything but pessimistic.
Sean, just looking at the stats here in terms of home and away record. Home record 9th in the standings. If you look at that alone, 33 points taken from 20 games. Away record 3rd in the league standings, 38 points from 20 games. Just under, obviously, 2 points a game there, 1.9. Again, is a team, Sean, do you think that suit maybe playing away from home, kind of on the counter-attack with obviously Charlie White up front and Aidan Mcgee?
Yeah, I think obviously it's kind of a bit of parallel to us, really. Just the difference has been we've kind of held on for the draws in those games. We've lost a lot of points from winning positions, especially in recent times at home. The longer you go on in a season, teams are going to sound you out more. And obviously they know that if you're up in the top 6 in the table, they're probably going to start to set off you more. And Sunderland will have been seeing that against them from the very start, just purely because of the reputation and then obviously the players that are in the team. You're naturally going to want to sit off and be more cautious against a team like Sunderland than you are any other. We kind of got away with that in the early parts of the season, and now we're starting to see that as we go into the final spell of the season. But you think of those sort of quality additions. I know obviously Graham was saying about Hull and Peterborough. I'm kind of a similar sort of way, where I don't particularly think they're the greatest teams in the world. It's just that in these games where it's tight affairs against your Plymouths and against your Accringtons, Johnson Clark-Harris will bag that winner in the 90th minute, like he did at Fleetwood away particularly. You think of Hull, you've got Malik Wilkes will pick those goals off, and it's those 2-1s and 1-0 wins that are the difference between going up automatically and settling for the playoffs. And I think obviously us and Sunderland in recent times have been capable of dropping points in that fashion. But I mean, as much as obviously Sunderland's away record is so positive and so good, Blackpool's home record obviously unbeaten since October at home, and it's just a place now where I think Blackpool, even on when they're having an off day like they did against Accrington, or say they did against Plymouth in recent weeks, they just have this confidence that they're not going to lose the game, and they know that they can carry on trying for better options in a creative sense and then potentially get a winner. So I think both teams go into this realistically had a bit of a wobble in recent weeks, but they both know they've got the quality to win the game. So that's why it'll be such a, really, I can't call it, and I don't think anyone really can, to be honest.
I might go to the bookies now, Graham, and put 0-0 on for the tomorrow's game if that's the case. But 61 goals scored in those 40 games. It's not many to fair if you look at the goals per game. But when you're looking at kind of going forward and the stats, Charlie White scored 23 of those goals in 38 appearances. He's a huge player for you, and he's going to be a huge player to the run into the end of the season.
Bizarre. Charlie White that we've seen this season. To be fair to Charlie, we signed him from Bradford when we first came down here. He signed with an injury. He got belted in the knee from Burton's goalkeeper in his first proper game, and I think we'd signed Charlie White to be like the number 9, that striker to get us back up when we first signed him, and it turned out Josh Maja was actually really, really, really good. And then Maja's departure kind of left the same time as Charlie White came back from injury, and Charlie White just isn't as good, simply put. And then that already kind of, I wouldn't say put fans against him, but he wasn't doing enough for people to say, well, yeah, he's going to score his 20, 30 goals and get us promoted. He just wasn't. And he didn't do that last season. And I think we signed Danny Graham for some bizarre reason in the summer. And we were so light up front because Will Grigg has not worked out. I think everyone can see that. That's never going to work out. And we were kind of like, well, yeah, I know Danny Graham scored 1 goal in 40 games last time, but he was in the Premiership and yada. And yet we're 8 months down the line, he's now retired. So that tells you how that move worked out. But Charlie White just, a couple of years ago, I was at a game in Scotland, and I bumped into Matt Kilgallen and kind of asked him what he was doing there and yada yada. But we got chatting about Charlie White at the time, and he said, "Oh, I used to play with him at Bradford." And he went, "To be honest, he's a real confidence player. If you get him confident, he'll bag you 30 goals, no problem." And I'm laughing at him, and I'm thinking, what are you on? But it's turned out to be right, and it's the first time that Charlie White has had a pre-season. It's the first time he wasn't injured going into a season. He looks more confident. He looks more hungry. I was a little bit worried when he went 4 or 5 games recently without a goal, but then he scored on Tuesday, and he was one of the players that came out with probably more credit than a lot of the other players did. He's been great for us. I really can't knock him this season. I'd love to be able to knock all of them because looks like they might not be getting us promoted automatically again, but it's really hard to knock Charlie White this season. He's been on the end of absolutely everything Aidan Mcgee chucked at him, and he just looks like a different Charlie White. He has had a hair transplant. So
is that playing an impact, do you think? That could be a huge...
I do think the extra inch might be that. Might have given an extra inch on top of his head, but it's coincided with good form. So if all of our players could have their own hair transplants, that would be much appreciated.
Never know. It might have played a part in him scoring 2 hat-tricks, Sean. First one against Wimbledon away from home on the 16th of Jan, and then 4 goals against Doncaster in the 4-1 victory at the Stadium of Light. And he's one player that Blackpool's defenders tomorrow, probably Ballard and Gretson, if we're going off recent teams and how they've played. It's going to be a big test for the Blackpool's defenders tomorrow to deal with him.
Yeah, obviously you think of recent goal scorers that have come, you've got to think of Johnson, Clark, Harrison, how quiet we kept him at Bloomfield Road. He didn't really look to have anything in the game, to be quite honest. Charlie White, as you say, he's kind of come from nowhere, really. He was kind of written off a bit at Sunderland. I'm thinking of the other striking options. They signed some weird striking options. I was surprised they signed Ross Stewart from Ross County. I've got a Celtic connection, obviously, and I've seen a lot of the SPL, and I think I was looking about 3 or 4 other strikers in the Scottish Premiership before I'd be signing Ross Stewart, but he looks like he's had somewhat of an okay impact off the bench so far. But you're thinking of Charlie White, and again, it's that difference maker. You've got Malik Wilkes, you've got Johnson Clark-Harris, you've got Jerry Yates. And it's just the case that when you have those players in that run of form and being able to score goals from nothing, it can be such a tight affair, and then they just pull out that moment that you need to pick up the win. And that's where it's all about concentration and anticipation of where he's going to be. And I think if you're going to ask anybody to do that job against Charlie Wack, I think you're going to ask Ballard and Gretson, and I think they'd be able to do a good job against him.
Yeah, great. Talk to us about Aidan Mcgee, someone who, I guess, maybe not had the best times at Sunderland, but he's been a player that's obviously wears his heart on the sleeve. And from watching him in previous years at his previous clubs, he's a player that can get fans off the seats and everything. And I remember that goal a few weeks back against Peterborough to salvage a point. It was to score late on to salvage a point against them. Yeah. For say Blackpool fans who haven't maybe seen him or watched him, if he plays tomorrow, what can Blackpool fans expect from Aidan Mcgee?
If Aidan Mcgee really, really fancies it, like if you get Aidan Mcgee on top form, we'll win. You'll not be able to cope with him. He's just too good. At this level, he's far too good. I mean, you touched on the Doncaster game before. Charlie White got man of the match because he scored 4 goals. Aidan Mcgee was man of the match. He got 4 assists. He basically just found him every time. And don't get me wrong, I think if he was in the Premiership, it'd be very different. There'd be people that'd be able to work him out because it's obviously a far different division, and maybe even so in the Championship. But he's kind of only in League One by accident. He joined us in the Championship. I think most people didn't expect us to go down. Maybe we could challenge for playoffs or mid-table or something like that, and he would do the job. And he had a very good season at Preston beforehand under Grayson, and then lo and behold, Sunderland did something and fell through the division. So he kind of landed in League One, and then Phil Parkinson ostracised him for a year. So he's now 35. There's no point in him looking towards a move to the Championship and so on and so forth. Otherwise, I don't think he would have ever been in this division. But his feats are just ridiculous. Like, I mean, I obviously watched him quite a bit because all my family are Rangers fans. So that says everything. How much am I speaking nicely about him? Considering all my family are Rangers fans, and I love him. But Mcgee on form is just, in my opinion, the best player in the division, and has been for seasons on end. We talk about Lee Johnson's improval of the side, and all of the stats don't necessarily show it's been that improved. Having Mcgee in the team just gives you just something completely different. Like, he's a interesting character, so it seems. You can never claim to know what he's like without actually speaking and sitting down with him. Obviously, he's done a few podcasts and stuff like that. Oh, Northampton have a penalty. Please score it. And when it comes to Mcgee, I think he's the kind of player that just doesn't accept that Sunderland Association Football Club are happy to draw against the likes of Burton and stuff like that. And some people might find that quite disrespectful. I love it. I love the fact that he will not accept that, because we shouldn't accept that. Like, Sunderland are a much bigger club than what this division has. We should be getting out of it. Northampton scored. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Good news for you.
Well, like I said before, we're going to get promoted and win the league. But Mcgee is... I'm too excited. But Mcgee, I mean, obviously, Sean, if you have Celtic connections, you'll remember Mcgee as a young boy, and I think the biggest compliment you could probably give to Aidan Mcgee is that he probably didn't fulfill his undoubted massive potential, and yet he's played Champions League, Premier League, and all over. If Mcgee fancies it against any team in this division, I don't see teams being able to cope with this, because he can win games on his own. Sometimes that can be a detriment, because it's like give the ball to Mcgee and see what he can do. But he's just unplayable at times. But, you know, there can be games where he does go a little bit quiet. Peterborough, in particular, he didn't do anything all game, but they banged in a 25-yard free kick. So I would say he's the man to watch 100% for us, 100%.
Sean, just come to you. Obviously, your kind of connections up there, and he's had a great career. Looking at his stats, Spartak Moscow went up there, Everton, Sheff Wednesday, the Nobbers, Preston, Sunderland, loan at Charlton. He's just got to... He's a player, Sean, that can probably play in any of those, I say, front four positions: striker, left mid, or say left wing, right wing, behind the striker. He's someone that's quite versatile, and along with Wyke, if Blackpool can't stop those two, you're going to have some issues, aren't they?
Yeah, he's such a unique player. Like I remember, obviously, when I went up there, and my first real memories of Celtic with 07-08 season in the Champions League. He's taken on AC Milan, taken on the likes of Barcelona, and he's looking like he was at that level. There was points in that season where he was linked with every top club that was around, and he ended up going to Spartak Moscow for the money, and just didn't quite. People forget you're there when you're in places like Russia and these sort of places, and that's simply where he lost out, really, because he was still playing at that same consistent level, but just for a team that people didn't really watch. And now he's 35 now, and he's doing it in League One. And as Graham said, it's similar to Wes Hoolahan in League Two, completely above the level that they're playing at. As Graham said, he can win a game by himself. He could play in any position in that front four, and it's that unique. It's just that difference maker. That's why Sunderland are Sunderland. That's why Sunderland are that big club that everyone talks about being too big for League One. They can entice a player like Aidan Mcgee to play in that league. I don't think any other club in the division, bar probably potentially Portsmouth, could attract a player like McGee to play in the league. As much as I'd like us to attract him, obviously, maybe when he's like 39 or something. But as I say, he's just the difference maker, and he always has been, no matter where he's been, whether he's been sporadic or not in terms of consistency with it, which has obviously been his flaw. He has got, as Graham said, that arrogant streak about him when it matters. I remember him when Celtic won the league, giving it to the camera about Nacho Novo, telling him to watch it and drink it in with the league title. He's got that about him, and that's that arrogant streak that you love a player like that when they play for you, those winners. He's a winner, and that's why he's at Sunderland, and that's obviously, as Graham said, he expects them to be better than where they are, and he'll be the one that will drag them to it.
Sean, who would you say is kind of that equivalent in the Blackpool squad? Would you kind of compare him to Yates, a bit of a lad, kind of a player who doesn't expect, as we've seen in our own eyes on the pitch, that he's someone who just expects the best from his teammates, doesn't he? And doesn't want Blackpool to be drawn against, no disrespect again, to the likes of Accrington, who are quite a small club in the league, but he doesn't want to lose games. He wants to play his best. He wants to get to the highest level possible. Would you compare him, or do you think there's someone else in the Blackpool squad that would be similar to Aidan Mcgee in the characteristics of him?
No, I think mentality-wise and that difference maker, I think Yates is that man. Obviously, CJ Hamilton can make a difference as well, but obviously he's that injured. He's probably got similar characteristics in terms of his technical ability. But Jerry Yates is, again, a player that, although he's not been there and done it like McGeady has, you know that he's going to in the future. He's got that about him. We see a player sometimes and you just know that they're destined for better things. And Jerry Yates is that player, and you hear him screaming at players in the midfield that they're losing the composure, they're losing the control of the game, when he can see it fading, he can see it coming, and he wants to keep that tempo up, and he leads from the front with the pressing and the intensity that he plays at. And if everyone, at the end of the day, if we had 11 Jerry Yates in the side in terms of the off-the-ball work, we'd be absolutely walking this league, because his intensity in terms of the way he plays, his positional sense, he's such a clever, intelligent player, but he's also got the technical ability to match. And as I've said before, it's very hard to find the balance in League One with strikers like that. You either have someone that is able to put the ball in the net but doesn't quite have the work technically, or you end up with the technical player but they don't quite have the finishing touch, and that's why they're in League One. But we've kind of struck gold with Jerry Yates because he's the most perfect all-round striker for us, and I think he's only destined for better things.
Yeah, definitely. Talking about composed player and someone who can unlock the gates, a player who on loan from Sunderland, Elliot Embleton, 11 games for Sunderland this season. Graham, were you surprised in the transfer window that he left Sunderland? I've read so many articles, I've seen fans messages on Twitter. They are surprised. Are you one of them?
I was like an anomaly that wasn't, because I've seen it as McGeady in the 10, Maguire can play in the 10, Lyndon Gooch can play in the 10, or we can play two up front. So I wasn't that surprised, but I've got to be honest and say I've never been that enamoured with Elliot Embleton. So I'm delighted that he's seemingly proven me wrong, because that's what you want from a boy who's born in Sunderland. But he's struggled a lot with injuries, so it's been difficult to sort of have that judge on him, because the beginning of last season, he started off 2 games under Jack Ross, and then Jack Ross decided he wanted to change the formation. He was playing 3 at the back. He decided he didn't want to play 3 at the back, and he went to 4 in midfield, 5 in midfield. Sort of the 3-5, you know where I'm coming from. and he kind of got moved out, and then he played against Sheffield United in the Cup and played on like the left wing on the left side of a front four. Played really well, did his hamstring really badly, to the point where he was pretty much done for the rest of the season. By that time, Phil Parkinson's came in. You've got a new manager that doesn't know this kid that's come through, highly rated, but he's injured. He's not going to get a look in. And Phil Parkinson's not the kind of person that would have played Elliot Embleton. At all. He's very like, you put him there, and I don't want anyone that goes and tries to create stuff. Like I want it like this, basically. And then he came in this season, and I think he's probably quite unlucky that he's had all those injuries, but he's also within the squad that's got the likes of Maguire, Gooch, McGee, players in that position. So I think there's one point we brought him on at left back this season, I think, which is bizarre, to be honest. But I'm delighted to see he's doing well, because every Blackpool fan I've spoken to has said to me, I don't see why he wouldn't come back into your side even if you do go up. Like he looks at that level, and I think what he's been crying out for, he had games at Grimsby, and Grimsby fans loved him. Grimsby fans thought he was fantastic, and that was a couple of years ago. Then you thought he was going to come back and get in the game, got those injuries, didn't. So the fact that he's gone to Blackpool, not been injured as far as I'm aware as yet, has created against the better sides in the league. Obviously, we noticed what he'd done against Peterborough. We noticed that he was seemingly one of the better players on the pitch there, got plenty of assists. I think he'll come back and do well. I was kind of pleased, even though I don't really rate him that highly, or haven't done when I've seen him, is the best thing to say, which is hard for me to judge on 11 to 12 games, and they've been sporadic. Not many of them have been full 90 minutes. I was pleased that we sent him to Blackpool, but also given him a 2-year contract. It was kind of like there's a 2-year contract. You've got an opportunity to go and prove yourself at a good club. It's got good pedigree to get yourself in the team and show that you can be an important player. And he's done that, because Blackpool, I think outside of Sunderland, the last 2 games have been the form side in the league, and he's seemingly a pivotal point of it. So it's kind of worked out for us, really, because even if we get you in the playoff final, he'll not be there.
Exactly, yeah.
I see Gareth asking if we would sell him. It depends how much you want to offer, really. I think he's one of those players where, like, if he realises his potential, he's played England under 17s, 18s, 19s. I think if he realises that potentially, he'll be a side higher than the League One team. Hopefully it's with us in the Championship, and hopefully he continues that trajectory he's seemingly been on with Blackpool. But you're probably in a better position than I am to judge Elliot. He's played that little for us.
I was going to say, Sean, obviously last game for Sunderland was against Ipswich. His first one for Blackpool was against Ipswich as well. That ended in defeat for Blackpool. But from then, he's been a huge part of Blackpool's team with the wins they've got. Graham talks there about the games against Peterborough, the goal against Gillingham in the 4-1 victory at Bloomfield Road. And again, nothing but high regard to him. I think he's a player that has been given the freedom by Neil Critchley to attack, coming from the right wing when Mitchell's not been playing, or through the middle. He's had that kind of freedom, hasn't he? And I think he's excelled in his performances that we've seen in him in a Blackpool shirt.
Yeah, I actually think he's dreadful, and Sunderland should probably release him in the summer. I think that's probably the best option for them. I'm thinking that's probably the best bet. But no, he's oh God, please don't. I think I was wondering, because you think of Ben Woodburn earlier in the season, who didn't really impress that much. I'm wondering if it seems that since the turn of the year, the shackles have been taken off somewhat of our more creative players. You look at Kai's re-emergence in form, because there's less of a structure to the way we're playing. There's more creative freedom. There's more of a license to go and express yourself in the final third. And I think had Embleton been in earlier in the season, perhaps he would have been guilty of the same sort of things that we were criticising Woodburn for, and maybe potentially could have gone the other way. But you look at Embleton, and he's that difference maker in the creative in the final third. You look at his movement. I always see the thing that stands out for me with Embleton is the way that he is able to drift into space so easily. He's able to, you look at the 2 banks of 4 of the opposition, and he's still able to find that space in behind the midfield line, and that's a difference maker at this level, I think, especially with the way that we play, trying to get the ball on the ground and playing through the thirds. If you've got someone that's able to find the space in behind the lines, that's where you're going to end up creating your chances. And Embleton's been able to do that. And to be honest, I would have gone 4-2-3-1 tomorrow had Embleton been available, but we're sticking with 4-4-2 just because that's the difference that he makes. I think the system is really built around him in some way in the 10. I think Kaka can replace him in the 10 potentially, but with the options that we've got out at the moment, it's hard to balance it out with that sense. So Embleton's been superb, and I mean, if we're able to get him next season, then we've done a bloody good job.
Yeah, Sadler, if you're watching this, checkbook out, and Blackpool fans want to see Embleton in a tangerine shirt next season. Josh has just got a comment in here. Defence has sorted itself out now for Blackpool, so there's more freedom up top. That's been a massive help. Completely agree with that comment. Josh, cheers for sending that one in. Sean, just before we kind of move on to score predictions and a little bit about the documentary, the Sunderland one, he's going to be a big miss tomorrow, isn't he, Embleton, in terms of the way Blackpool play? Were you surprised on Tuesday that Neil Critchley didn't adapt it, knowing that the team can use Accrington as a get-ready game, if that makes sense, to go into the Sunderland at the weekend?
Yeah, I think we were discussing that before the game against Accrington, whether he would do that. And I think it's just a lack of replacement options, really. I think, as I said, I would have gone 4-2-3-1 and tried to match up Sunderland in midfield with obviously the options that they've got in there. But you look at, it's hard to replace. It's just simply a case of we've got that many players out injured, and we always have done throughout the season, that it's hard to. I mean, you look, if you had CJ Hamilton available, then you're sorted. If you've got, you can just put Mitchell on the left, you can put Kaka in the 10, and you're fine, and you can adapt with that. But it's so hard to adapt with the way that we've been playing at the moment. I think he has in the past couple of games. The only sort of almost benefit that I've got out of these last 2 games is that he has drifted out of games and he hasn't been at his best in the past 2 games. And ultimately, we still didn't lose the games. We still were able to perform as well as we did against Lincoln for an hour, and he wasn't at his best in those 2 games. So it's just a case of, as we've said throughout the season, we've thought that when we lost CJ Hamilton, we lost Gary McGee, and that's it. The run's over, it's finished. And then we seem to be able to adapt no matter who's coming to the team. As I said, I think I said the other week, it's more about the system itself rather than the individuals and what they bring to the side, because each system has a defined role, and anyone that goes into those roles at the moment is able to slot in. I mean, Turton was at centre-half the other week. Jordan Thornley's even done a good job at centre-half. It's like these things seem to be able to just mould into shape, and I think we'll just do it again against Sunderland, as we have done with so many top teams this season.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're going to slightly off topic, and we'll come back to team selections and everyone's thoughts ahead of the game tomorrow, which is a 12:30 kickoff. Sorry for getting that wrong on the ticker at the start of the show. But Graham, I've come to you first. Sunderland Till We Die documentary aired, I think 2018. Believing just before we came on air that you had a 4-minute spell, I think on the second series of this. Before we come to that, what were your original thoughts when that documentary came out? Did you enjoy the show first and foremost?
I'm old enough, sadly, to remember Premier Passions, which is literally the premier football documentary. It's brilliant. It's Roker Park, it's Peter Reid, it's Bobby Saxton, it's swearing, it's everything. It's brilliant. Love it. And it's on YouTube, I think, if you can watch it. If you've enjoyed Something Till I Die, you'll definitely enjoy that. So there was an element of like, this will be good. If it's similar to Premier Passions, fantastic. If it's this kind of like airbrushed Man City documentary, it's going to be rubbish. And I was lucky enough to speak to, I think, the creator of it, Leo Pearlman. He literally came to university when the second one came out, and I thought, well, I'll get along. And obviously, he recognised me from one of the episodes, and so on and so forth. And we got chatting, and I said, like the first season, you absolutely nailed that, but you can't have imagined where that was going to go. And he says, well, it was meant to be. It was sold on this will be the Phoenix rising from the flames, getting the promotion from the championship. And he's like, and then gradually, the more we did it, the more we realized the season was going that badly. It was more about the people. And one thing I really liked about season 1 was that was a good way to showcase Sunderland fans. That's what we're like, really. I think especially in League One, there's a lot of preconceptions about what Sunderland fans are, but most of them wrong. Sunderland fans just love Sunderland. They would just put Sunderland first, Sunderland last, pretty much. I think that first season really showcased that really well, that no matter what gets thrown at us, all we can really do is continue to support the club. And that was like our lowest ebb. And I know technically League One is, but for me, relegated from the Championship, and the way that we went down along with the playoff final was probably the lowest ebb of me supporting Sunderland. Season 2, I had a feeling was going to go the way that it did because of the part that I had in the documentary. I was asked, obviously, if it could be filmed and so on and so forth. It was the scene where I'm questioning about the signing of Will Grigg, and lo and behold, I was right. Who would have believed me? And there's obviously a bit of a discussion between myself and Charlie Methven where he comes back at me and I go back at him. And the full podcast is quite an interesting one because it was done directly after the playoff final, which is not where it's placed in the show, funnily enough, which benefits me. So I'm not complaining about it because it makes me look like I'd call that Will Grigg signing long before anyone else. But you could sort of tell from the way that Charlie Methven was and Stuart Donald was less so, maybe, the way that was probably going to go. Because if I'm making a TV show and I get someone like Charlie Methven, like him or lump him, and most of Sunderland, I would say the majority, don't like him, but he is so David Brent, it's impossible not to put him on TV. Like, it's impossible not to place someone who's so hilariously bizarre in some ways, and so similar to one of the UK's most favourite TV characters in David Brent. You've kind of got to use him that way. So the second season was a bit of a weird one. I'm the kind of person that will get anxious when he's on the TV. I know I don't come across like that, but I definitely do, and especially when someone else is editing you. So I was a bit nervous about watching it. And it came out, and the Will Grigg scenario, and the way that we signed him, and it was like, oh God. So it was a lot harder to watch the second one, including the Checker Trade final and including the playoff final. One thing I think they really missed a trick on with the second season was something they did perfectly in season 1. When we went down to Wembley both times, to be honest with you, because it's such a trek, similar to you guys as well, West obviously slightly further, where that far away from Wembley and you're getting a coach down, you 4 or 5 can end up having like 9 or 10 beers. So by the time you get to Trafalgar Square, you're absolutely gone, and the songs are going, and everyone's a little bit worse for wear. And the atmosphere, like both nights in Trafalgar Square, was great. Like it was one of those. I talked about community before, and something I miss. That was like the Sunderland community all in London, just having fun, just proud of the club for once for actually getting somewhere. I mean, the Checker Trade final, the Papa John's Trophy final is not where we want Sunderland to be, but we're here, so we might as well enjoy it. And that's kind of how it felt. And they totally missed that in the second season. They just went straight to the final and us being Cattermole missing the penalty. And a lot of people look at Lee Cattermole missing that penalty and think it tainted his legacy. It really didn't. It was like the most meaningless final ever. It didn't matter. And they focused an awful lot on that when they could have focused on the fans that it did in the first one. So as much as the people in the second season, such as myself, were a lot more handsome than the ones in season 1, I've got to say I preferred season 1 to season 2.
Sean, have you watched the documentary Sunderland Till I Die? And if you have done, what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it was real, wasn't it? And that's the most important thing. It was genuine. It was exactly what was happening at the time. As Graham said, you've got these Juventus and Man City documentaries, and the Spurs one even to an extent, and they're sort of just club PR driven. And the Sunderland one was the only real one you've had. As Cliff says, obviously, if we'd have had our own, I think we'd have only been able to air about 3 minutes of it. They had Owen Oyston doing a cribs around his penthouse, and Bob Malcolm giving it a Rocky montage before he sparked out Stephen Dobby. But it was interesting. And as Graham said, it's the personalities in the support that you don't really know about, and you get to know the taxi driver and those sort of people that personify what football's all about, especially in working class communities. And I think that's really what drove home is the working class community in Sunderland is so unified and really together in their causes that they have. And I think it's a good show of why football is a lot more than football. It's about culture, it's about politics, it's about these things that really matter in your communities, and sometimes it's life and death to people, and it needs to be treated as it is, because some people don't have anything other than football to go to. That's their life. They work 9 to 5, a boring job, and then they'll go and watch the football with their mates, and they've lost that this season. And in places like Sunderland, where you think of unemployment rates, you think of all these things going on, that's why it's so important, and that's why I think football's so special, and that's what really highlighted in that documentary.
I'll just come in there before Josh. I'll bring Josh's comment up about Will Grigg if we won't go on too much about this. But I think having been inside of a football club myself, you actually know kind of how maybe the transfers go about and how maybe the ticket office, for example, when Sunderland wanted to break the record, I think it was Boxing Day or New Year's Day, one of those two. And again, I think it's great for fans to actually see the inside of the club, where Man City one was, like you said, PR based, and we're a club based in Manchester, England, United Kingdom. It was all kind of that, but I thought it was a fantastic documentary. And Josh just brings one here, Graham, asking, obviously you spoke about this on air maybe, the Grigg transfer, they started off offering 300k and then ended up paying around 3 million. He says bizarre, and I want to use the same word as him. It's just, how do you go from that mindset, right, we'll offer under $1 million, under $500,000 here, and we go to, that number. It's absolutely ridiculous, really, that the staff probably might not have been made accountable for that judgment that they made on the Will Grigg signing.
Hindsight's a sort of a wonderful thing. And I remember when it happened, and we sold Madger. The Madger situation had dragged on for ages. There was a point in the season where Stuart Donald had said, I'm going to give him to this date to sign the contract. If he doesn't, that's it. The deadline came, and he went, I'll give him a week. And it became like, oh my God, we're absolutely desperate to hang on to this striker. Of course we were. We were absolutely desperate to hang on to Josh Madger. There's a reason he might be playing in relegation places in the Premier League, but he's good enough. He's good enough to play at that level, and we could all see it. So you start looking at replacements, and you think, this guy, that guy. And I think the first choice was Will Grigg, as far as I'm aware. And I can't deny that I was writing for a fanzine at that point, and we all knew Will Grigg was a transfer target. Stuff was getting leaked. It was just dead unprofessional. And that kind of summed up that whole scenario, didn't it? It was just unprofessional. And it's baffling and frustrating that Jack Ross, I think, actually says on the phone on the documentary that don't spend more than 1.25. It's not worth more than that. And we all knew that. And at the time, Sunderland fans went, oh God, we just need a striker. We just need anyone. 3 million, whatever. It's not my money. I don't care. If it works here, brilliant. But there's a reason that chairmen are in places and recruitment people are in places. And it's to not have the fans' attitude. And I think Stuart Donald was so desperate to be liked. And so desperate to make that signing. Lo and behold, later in the documentary, I start asking, why did you go for Will Grigg? Did you ever ask Jack Ross where he fits in? Because evidently he doesn't. He's played 6 months of the season now, and he just doesn't fit the same way. He's so different to Josh Madger. And I was told I wasn't allowed to have a conversation in public about a player's performance, which is ironic when you go back to Boxing Day and Charlie trying to get the numbers from that woman, because I'm sure that was in public and discussing a woman's performance. But by the by, I think the whole scenario just sums up why Sunderland are still where they're at. We got took over from a guy who'd made loads of mistakes. Ellis Short made a lot of mistakes at Sunderland. I don't think he did any of them purposefully. And when he realised he was just out of his depth, he sold the club. But Ellis Short's biggest mistake was selling it to Stuart Donald, because the guy, from what it seems, wanted to turn a quick buck. I don't know this for certain, but I think that he wanted to turn a quick buck, sell the club, and it would have been fine. He would have been... probably rightly so, but promotion doesn't just happen at the click of a fingers, and a £3 million signing of a striker that's got promoted before. And thankfully, it seems like we've got a guy that understands you need a recruitment strategy in place. The noises coming from Sunderland at the minute are a lot better, but going back to that Will Grigg situation, it's just like, for me personally, it was nice because it justifies what I said later on in the documentary, which at the time, in real time, we went to know a lot of that stuff. In the documentary, it makes me look like a Mystic Meg. But I think it didn't take that long for people to start noticing. You'll remember Will Grigg's home debut, rounds the goalkeeper, open goal, side net. And at that point, everyone sat around me just went, oh God, it's going to be one of them, innit? It was like, it's going to be one of them. And I don't think Will Greig's a bad striker. It was just never going to work out with Sunderland because the recruitment was incorrect. And yet, 3 million.
It might be my connection, so apologies if obviously the hosting it, so apologies if anything lags out or anything. But talking about owners, you've mentioned Blackpool having the change of ownership with Simon Sadler coming in, who was at the game on Tuesday night to watch Blackpool's game against Accrington. But Sunderland new owners in, haven't they? Kyril Lewis Dreyfus, if I say that right. Obviously, I think he's 23 years of old, a billionaire family from the French giants Marseille. Shaking your head there a little bit. What are your thoughts on? Mad, isn't it, really?
Madness. Yeah, a billionaire 23-year-old in this day and age, crikey. But he's been great, to be fair. He's made a good start. Sunderland fans are naturally the kind of people who will be welcoming to anyone coming into the club, as shown by Stuart Donald, which bit us on the backside a lot. So I think the fact that a bit is on the backside means you're always a bit wary, but he's made good steps. He's employed Christian Speakman, who obviously had something to do, an awful lot to do with Jude Bellingham's development at Birmingham, and he's highly praised. He's come in to overlook that side of things. He's started putting people in places, and it's starting to look like we actually have a football club that understands what they're doing. And I think looks can be deceiving, and putting people in positions can be deceiving sometimes, but he surely picked something up by the fact that he's been in Marseille. And I think he's been invested in football for a lot longer, from birth, pretty much. So those 23 years have been filled with football. And I think he's done a lot more than just gone, I've got money, I want to own a football club. I think he's actively invested in stuff. Like the first thing he did was say, the streaming's not good enough for Sunderland fans. We need to have 4 streaming cameras. So now our streaming's a bit more Sky Sports-esque than iFollow is. It's kind of an in-between, which is nice. He wrote a personal letter to everyone. The best thing he did, though, was in that letter, he said, sometimes it's going to be a struggle. It's not all going to go perfectly. You know, we might go up the season, we might not. But if we don't, we have to remain being together. You know, the plan is not out the window if we don't get promoted this season. Yeah. It'll feel like that as a fan. But I think he very much said, like, look, it's us getting promoted. It's not a nailed on certainty. If you flip that to Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven, they were saying, we're going to get 100 points. So I think you can already see, despite the fact that, you know, once bitten, twice shy, we can already sort of see this guy knows what he's talking about. But he does look about 12. I've seen that comment. He does look incredibly young, which I'm not jealous of at all, heading into my 35th year.
I guess that's Sean. Well, again, we'll come on to team selection. So if you want to start getting your team selections in for tomorrow, do let us know. Whether you're a Sunderland fan, Blackpool fan as well. We're great to hear what you think your managers will choose come 2 o'clock. Sorry, not 2 o'clock. Get that wrong. 11:30 tomorrow, isn't it? I keep forgetting. Throw me all these games and kickoff changes. But yeah, Sean, coming to you, I guess that's a bit like Sadler in some ways, that maybe he's come in thinking, I'll put some money in, we'll get out of this league. Again, maybe a bit naive in some respects, but you've got to realise what big teams are in this league now. You've got your Sunderlands, Portsmouth, Peterboroughs, Charlton in there, who are a bit of a yo-yo club at the moment between the two leagues. So when you're actually looking at the scale of what owners have to do, you've got to invest so much money and bringing the right players, bringing the right staff, bringing the right people on the club board, if that makes sense. So it's not an easy job, is it, for any owner? But being realistic, like Kyril is the Sunderland owner, by being honest, and Ipswich as well. Thanks, Chris, for mentioning that. By him being honest, saying we might not go up this year, but if we do, we'll have a good go next year. Do you think fans appreciate that more than saying, "Oh, we'll get 100 points" and all this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if you think of every single owner that's made an outlandish claim about where they're going to be, I think pretty much 9 times out of 10 they've been one that's fell flat on their arse, and then they've left about 5 years later. If you think about previous history, yeah. It's about being measured, because at the end of the day, it's like you've said, it's sort of that structured, measured, long-term plan. At the end of the day, clubs that have those implemented plans and there's not an all or nothing approach to a season, they inevitably end up getting promoted before the teams that want the quick fix anyway. It's just a natural process that over 10 years, they're going to be better off than the team that wants the quick fix over a 1 or 2 year period. That's always been the case. You look at Bournemouth, you look at teams like that have took that structure. They're far away from, say, you look at Bolton, who've gone all or nothing this season. You look at the teams like that just go for it in that one season. There's no structure to it. I mean, the background work that Blackpool have done recruitment-wise, you're looking at the training ground, you're looking at look at data analysis and that sort of thing that we're looking into and delving into now. It's all the modern approaches to the game. And I think if you've got a young owner, particularly like Sunderland have, they're going to be well invested in that side of the game. That's the future of the game. At the end of the day, as I said before, it just naturally, it's the natural process that teams that are more well managed, more structured, and they don't have these big offset targets, they're the ones that end up going further. I mean, you mentioned Sadler, obviously. Yeah. I think he did learn his lesson. I think we brought in Grayson, and we thought that League One was going to be run of the mill, and a load of teams have made that same mistake before, and we've learned that lesson now, and we've brought in a head coach that at the end of the day, if we don't go up this season, it's not the end of the world. And we know that the process long term is going to naturally take us to where we want to be, whether it's 3 or 4 seasons or whether it's 1 or 2. And that's the best way to go about it.
Completely agree. We'll move on to the last few sections of the show. And obviously, we'll pay our respects to Billy Eyre, whose kind of anniversary of him in passing is today. So we will mention that at the end of the show. I know people have mentioned it, so it hasn't been forgotten, by the way. Team selections, I'll come to Graham. I'll give you maybe a minute or two to think of how Sunderland might line up tomorrow. But Sean, we were talking before, very similar, I think, the same lineup we went for. But just discuss what you've chosen here and why you've chosen this team that you would like to start tomorrow against Sunderland.
Yeah, I've actually changed my mind.
You've changed it now. You tell me.
Yeah,
no, I'm joking.
No, right now, literally right this second. No, I've been thinking about it more. I think I'm going to play James Husband at left back instead of Luke Garbutt, and that's because Luke Garbutt's been quite defensively suspect in the past couple of weeks. And I think that if you're playing against the likes of Jordan Jones, McGee, these players that can sort of loiter around in the final third, and they're going to be pinning us. But whether we like it or not, because I think that the difference with Sunderland is we think that we're going to get pinned back by a team, but ultimately, if we put on our front foot, we'll be able to pin them back at the other end. But with Sunderland, I don't think you can do that. I think you're still going to have those moments where you're going to be pinned back in your own half, and you need to be defensively sound. And I think that Garbutt, if you look at the past few goals we've conceded, he's been quite suspect in those areas, and he's always added so much more in an attacking dimension. But I think ultimately the game's going to be won in the middle of the pitch for us, and for Sunderland, it's going to be won in those areas in the final third, just in front of the defence on the edge of the area. And if you've got a structured defensive unit at the back, rather than you've got Garbutt who will push forward, then I think that's the better option.
But on the flip side of that, on the flip side of that, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. That when he's kept a few clean sheets at the back, to me on Tuesday, I thought he defended quite well. He got some good tackles in down his left side. So when you're actually looking at that and you're looking at a solid defence, do you change a back four that have kept a clean sheet in that game? And someone who as well has that attacking threats going forward. I think he's improved massively on his defensive duties. But we saw on Tuesday a strike at goal hit the post. He scored. We're trying to think what the game is. He's obviously scored from attacking position. So do you change it in that respect that you want to be more solid, knowing that he's kept a clean sheet in his last few games?
Yeah, obviously. I think, you're saying about the clean sheet. You're thinking of Ollie Turton. He was shipped out for Gabriel after such great defensive performances. I think we can move people in and out and we still keep that defensive solidity, because I think it comes through the central areas and the organisation we have between Ballard and Gretason, or even if Ekpiteta gets thrown in. I mean, Ekpiteta, I think, is the best defender we've got, but I just think it's probably too soon for him potentially. But I just think that Husband offers that. I think you can rely on Husband more than you can Gabriel defensively. I've said before with Thornley about the reliance on a player, and I think that potentially having that defensive solidity in Husband that you kind of guaranteed nowadays is more worthwhile than having Garbutt. I think it's worth missing out on that slight attacking output if it means that that's the case. Because I saw Josh mentioned set pieces. I think Karkai has improved on his set pieces recently. I think that's something that we can offer. But ultimately, at the end of the day, as I said before, it's going to be one in the midfield. If Dougal and Ward are able to run the midfield in the central areas and push forward and create chances, then I think that's where we're going to win the game, as it always has been throughout the season. That's been the difference maker.
Yeah, completely agree. Just thought I'd push that out there to yourself and the fans watching. Just other Blackpool teams before we go to Graham. Steve says Maxwell in goal, Turton, Husband, Ballard and Gretson at the back, Kenny, Dougal and Grant Ward at the holding midfielders, with Gabriel, Kai and Garbett behind Jerry Yates, a 4-2-3-1 with Ellis Sims to come off the bench with Mitchell. We'll get a few more. Josh, he says Maxwell, Garbett, Ballard, Gretson, Turton. Change there for Gabriel, Ward, Dougal, Mitchell, Kai. Oh, sorry, Gabriel's in the team. Shouldn't have jumped the gun. Gabriel up top with Yates as the lone striker. Gareth says Maxwell, Turts, Viking, Ballard, Garbett, Ward, Robson, Dougal, Kai, Sims, and Yates in there. We'll see if there's a few more. Matt says, obviously a regular on the show, he says, who knows what Coach Critchley might do. Turton for Gabriel and Mitchell for Embleton for 4-4-2. That's a thing we've said quite a few times this year, 4-4-2. And Cliff has got his in, hasn't he, as well? There we go. Sorry, Cliff. Yours is here. Maxwell, Turton, Husband, Ballard, Viking, Gabriel, Ward, Dougal, Robson, Kai, and Yates. Again, strong teams there that Blackpool can put forward. But Graham, I've come to you, and sorry we don't have a graphic, but if you were the Sunderland manager heading to tomorrow's game, how would you line up against Blackpool?
I think we're struggling in defence, really, so that kind of picks itself. Obviously, Lee Burge plays in goal because he's done all right. You know, we had a poor game, poor start of the season, but he's kept the most clean sheets in the league. So Lee Burge plays mainly also because Remy Matthews is so horrendous. He obviously gets played ahead of him. Then your back four, you're probably looking at Max Power is going to have to be playing at right back. He's obviously not a right back, but he's played plenty of games there. I don't mind him there too much. Luke O'Nien's played at centre-half for a long time. Bailey Wright came back on Tuesday. Sanderson's going to be out, so you're going to have Wright alongside Luke O'Nien. There's a debate over who you play at left-back because Denver Humes just came back into the squad. But Callum McFadden is a huge weak spot for us, so I think Sunderland fans would prefer Denver Hume to play there, despite the fact he's obviously not fully fit or match fit at the least. In midfield is probably where I'd make the biggest changes. I think to probably combat, your style of play and the fact that you have got a bit of pace and you can come at us on the break. I would like to see us play both Ledbetter and Winchester. Both very good at keeping the ball. Sometimes can be frustrating when you're wanting to attack the game because Ledbetter and Winchester can slow it down a little bit. But sometimes you sort of need that. You need that experience, especially when it comes to Grant Ledbetter. Ledbetter obviously never played at League One in his life before he hit his late 30s, and he's a Sunderland boy. I think the only reason he was here, I would like to think Ledbetter and Winchester would play there just to kind of nullify your attacking threat a little bit. But then on the flip side, I'd go very attacking with our front four. I think McGee obviously picks himself on the left side. Mm-hmm. Jordan Jones was incredibly poor on Tuesday, but it's the first real bad game he's had. He's another player that's far above this level. I think had he had a slightly better attitude, maybe at Rangers, based on what has been said, he might have still been part of their squad. And let's be honest, Rangers and the SPLs, those teams are far bigger and better than any side in this league. So on his day, he's superb, but he's got to want it. He didn't seem to want it too much on Tuesday, so hopefully he comes back correctly. The biggest change I would make as a player that hasn't been in the squad for 2 or 3 games, I bring Chris Maguire in the number 10 role. A lot of Sunderland fans don't quite understand why Chris Maguire has been dropped from the squad completely. We can understand maybe him not playing every week, but I think the choice between Maguire and Gooch or McGee in the number 10, I prefer McGee on the left and I put Maguire in. He's very inconsistent at the best of times, but he's the kind of player that can win you a match, and we need to win tomorrow's game. It's not a case of we can take a draw, we really can't. And then up front, you've got Charlie White. Of course, got to be Charlie White, I think. Yeah,
definitely. We're not had any Sunderland fans give their teams in. I'll just reload the comments, but doesn't seem to be. If we'll finish off with score predictions, and then a little tribute to Billy, King Billy, as Blackpool fans remember him as. Never saw him obviously manage, but from what I heard, a great guy and someone who's very passionate about Blackpool Football Club. But score predictions, Sean, I'll come to you first. We've done the teams, now down to the nitty-gritty stuff. Where's the 3 points going to, or will it be a share of the points?
Well, a few people are saying, would you settle for a point for this game? I think I would have, had we not also got a trip to Sunderland in about a week's time. So that's where the difference comes. You normally have already played them once by now, but I'm going 1-0 Blackpool. I think it's going to be similar to the Portsmouth home game and the away game as well, where it's really tight, it's really edgy, and it's that just moment of magic, that moment difference. And I think Jerry Yates will provide that for us. And I just think that we'll have that defensive solidity back at home against Sunderland to keep a clean sheet, and that'll be enough to pick up the 3 points.
Is it kind of a 3 points here and see what happens at their place, do you think, in terms of got to play them in such quick succession? Do you look at it that way, or do you think we've got to go and think 6 points here?
I don't think 6 points. I mean, I would...
4, you 4 would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think that if we're saying we're this team that's great, we're this team that's going to get promoted and what have you, then you have to be looking at a minimum of 4 points. These are the teams you have to beat. We're going to have to come up against them in the playoffs anyway if we end up in the playoffs. So you have to beat them, and you have to beat them at home and then pick up your points away. We've kind of been doing it the other way around recently, where we've been picking up the wins away and then drawing at home. But ultimately, if you pick up 4 out of 6, then you keep doing that against every team in the division going forward, then you get promoted. That's simple as that, really.
Yeah, a few from the chat before we come to Graham. Ray Gregson says 2-1 to Blackpool, as well as Stephen. Chris Harrison says draw 1-1 or 0-0. It'd be very tight. We may nick it by 1-0. Gareth, on the other hand, got a bad feeling about tomorrow's game against Sunderland. He thinks it's going to be Blackpool 0, Sunderland 2. Dan BFC says a nervy 1-1. And finally, before we go to Graham, Josh says 4-0 to Blackpool. Got a feeling one team's going to pump the other. I can't say I'm 100% sure if it would be Poole. So we'll see. Graham, I'll come to you. Your score predictions for tomorrow's game?
I can give you the Sunderland fans' feeling scoreline. I can give you the balanced, I'm actually thinking about what might happen sort of scoreline. So I said 1-0 Blackpool on my podcast. Probably didn't help that I recorded directly after the Wigan game. I do think it's a tough game. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a tough game. It's not one of those games, and I'm not just saying that because I'm on a Blackpool podcast. It's not one of those games like a Wigan, for example, where you say we've got to be winning these games. These are maybe the games where you go, if we got a point here and beat the likes of, your Accrington at home, Northampton at home, then fair enough. So I've said 1-0 Blackpool, but then with all due respect to Sunderland, as much as they've kind of continuously let us down since they've been here, we haven't lost 3 in a row for a long, long time. And that would be a real question of the players' characters to lose 3 games in a row. And I think, as much as I have criticised them the past week, they've got a little bit more about themselves, and they've shown that a few times this season, just to give themselves a fighting chance of automatic promotion, because we were horrific at the start of the season, really, to be honest. So I think now we've had a couple of days digestion of the Wigan game. I think 1-1, because that would help none of us, really. So it's kind of the standard result. I think 1-1. Yeah, I don't really think... I think Jerry Yates can grab one for us, but I think we've got enough about ourselves to give you a really good game.
No, I'm with you on that one. I think, as well as Sean, I think Yates will bag. He's that type of player who will score in the big games and key moments in matches. So I'm going for a 1-1 draw tomorrow, and then pump you at your place and pick up 4 points. Andrew Shuard, he says a tough game, a 2-2 draw tomorrow. Jason Kinsella says a 3-2 win. I think he's a Blackpool fan. Apologies if he's not. Cliff says the same as Gareth, about bad feeling, 2-1 to Sunderland. David says 2-1 to Blackpool, but not sure how. And as we saw before, quick comment here before we move on, Peterborough 3-1 up against Northampton. But I think that's everything, really. I would like to, obviously, I think someone's got a comment in before about paying the tributes to a great man, Billy Eyre, who sadly passed away on this day in 2002, age 49, after battling with cancer. He led the Seasiders to promotion from the 4th tier via the playoffs in 1998. So my thoughts and the thoughts from the Seasiders podcast and fellow Blackpool fans with obviously Billy and his family on this very sad day. So our thoughts are with them. But from us, it's been another great show. We've been an hour and 20. I think that's the longest we've had all season. But Graham, it's been great to have you on in terms of getting an understanding of Sunderland, a bit about the documentary, and your views on recent performances in the season so far. So from us, myself and the Seasiders podcast, it's been great to have you on, and wish you all the best after the 2 games we played against you.
Of course.
It's been great, and it's been great, to like I said, great to have you on, and a great insight. So I hope you've enjoyed it as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. It's the end of the day, we're not doing much at the moment, are we? We're just kind of trying to enjoy chatting about football since we can't watch it with each other. So thanks for having me on.
I was going to say, you might be in the beer gardens, to be fair, enjoying a pint in the lovely weather we've had this last week with the restrictions. But Sean, same again, mate, as ever. It's been great to have you on, and more insight, and I'll see you tomorrow at the game. I better not shout that, should I? To Blackpool
it's only
fans,
me that brags that.
I thought I'll change it around this time, and I'll take it. But no, but great to have you on again, mate, and hopefully Blackpool can get back to winning ways and pick up points against Sunderland. But again, huge thank you to everyone who's stayed tuned, got comments in. It's been great. Hope you enjoyed it as much as us. Don't forget to like and share the channel, the pages on social media and YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Can we reach 1,000 subscribers before the end of the season? Not long to go. So if you haven't done it already, do hit that button. But from myself and the rest of the gang here at the Seasiders podcast, it's good night.